One of humanity's most brilliant figures, Giordano Bruno was a leading member of the Renaissance, a period of artistic, cultural, and ideological change in Europe, during which other major figures stood out, such as Machiavelli and Thomas More in philosophy, Leonardo da Vinci in painting, Dante Alighieri in literature, among other well-known geniuses. By and large, Giordano Bruno's religious beliefs and philosophical system were at odds with what was accepted in Europe at the time he lived. This led to severe tensions with the church and a tragic end to his life, since his work and thinking broke with all the prevailing certainties of his time. Filippo Bruno was born in 1545 in Nola, in the Italian province of Naples. His father was Giovanni Bruno, and his mother was Fra Lisa Savellina. When he was 15, the young Bruno joined the convent of San Domenico in Naples, at which point he came to be called Giordano. The young Italian spent a decade in the convent and left in 1575. While living under such a Christian regime, Bruno met authors and themes that strayed quite far from the Catholic precepts, such as Lulius and Copernicus. The latter presented a new approach to thinking, which sought to reconcile reason and faith, while Copernicus was an advocate of heliocentrism, i.e., he believed that the Earth revolved around the Sun, differently from the prevailing and accepted notion at the time, which said that it was the Sun that rotated around the Earth, with it being the center of the universe. Having contacted these writers and many other ideas, as well as his interest in the Jewish Kabbalah and the work of Nicholas of Cusa, besides showing evidence that he had a different religious vision to that of Catholicism, Bruno soon began to be criticized, scrutinized, and berated by members of the convent. In general, he was always extremely critical of all the theological dogmas of his time. This rebellious nature, which manifested itself during this period, followed him throughout his life. Giordano was soon accused of heresy in 1576 and had to flee to Rome when he was still 28. Giordano Bruno moved on to other cities in his native country, including Turin, Genoa, Noli, and others. During the following 14 years, the well-known Italian thinker wandered around different European countries, such as France, England, Switzerland, and Germany. During this enriching experience of visiting various places on the European continent, Giordano Bruno taught astronomy and Latin. During his life, Giordano Bruno had problems not only with Catholic dogma. In 1579, when he was in the Italian commune of Genoa, he came close to the Calvinist church, but was soon excommunicated because he disagreed with some of its precepts. He was later also excommunicated by the Lutheran Church, to which he had converted during a period when he spent in Germany. He was expelled from the Lutheran Church after about a year. Just as had also happened in relation to Catholicism, his ideas were fundamentally different to what these two other religious doctrines had to offer. Giordano Bruno's philosophy was based on the idea that the universe was endless and unlimited. The famous Italian thinker also believed that there were many other planets like Earth, and that they too had intelligent life, just as our own world does. In his opinion, God was infinite, so his creation should also be infinite, since the effect, i.e. creation, would reflect the cause, i.e. God. Giordano considered God to be present in all things. He believed that matter was the bearer of a divine principle, meaning that everything had a soul. Nature was essentially divine, and so God was in everything. The human body, plants, minerals, stones, and animals all bore a soul. Bruno also advocated heliocentrism and strongly opposed Aristotelian philosophy, refuting the Greek philosophers' views on the cosmos and nature. Giordano Bruno not only had a different cosmological perspective to most of his contemporaries, but he also acquired a remarkable degree of knowledge about magic and religion and related subjects. This is why he is sometimes labeled as an occultist. His fascination with magic was a constant theme in his writings. While living in Frankfurt, Germany, he dictated the work Treatise on Magic to a disciple. This book deals with a range of topics, such as the different meanings of the word magic and their uses over time, as well as reflecting on subjects such as magicians, faith, imagination, spirits, and demons. Bruno also knew about hermeticism, a complex and profound ancient wisdom that is still one of the most important subjects in magic studies today. The so-called art of memory is surely one of the most interesting aspects of the Italian thinker's life. From what we know, one of the reasons Bruno became so famous was his extraordinary memory. It is said that he could memorize short passages, pages, or even entire books. The art of memory is also known as mnemotechnics, a subject addressed in some of Giordano Bruno's literary works, as he knew the precise techniques to memorize so many things. To do this, he basically used a range of symbolic illustrations that had certain specific meanings, and made use of the imagination as a powerful and effective tool with which to engrave in the mind what he wanted to absorb. Historically, nevertheless, this sort of memorization technique and practice didn't start with Bruno, but already existed and was used before him. But he stood out due to his knowledge of the subject and his astounding memorizing talent. Bruno went as far as to teach the art of memory to several people, including King Henry III. One of Bruno's works on the art of memory, called De Umbris Aedirum, was dedicated to Henry. During his wanderings in 1590, the thinker moved to Frankfurt, Germany. During his stay, he was contacted by a nobleman from Venice called Giovanni Mocenigo, who was keen to learn about Giordano Bruno's expertise in the art of memory. The philosopher agreed to leave with Mocenigo, who would give him shelter and protection in exchange for knowledge. On May 22, 1592, Mocenigo locked the philosopher in a room in his house and sent for the Holy Office, to whom he promptly handed over Giordano Bruno and some of his writings that had not yet been published. The church had already been eager to arrest him for his subversive works. Mocenigo double-crossed Bruno, and from that moment on, the Nola thinker's life turned tragic. Giordano Bruno's trial began on July 3, 1592, in Venice. In the following year, the trial continued in Rome. The philosopher was kept captive for the long years of his trial until, finally, on January 20, 1600, on the orders of Pope Clement VIII, the congregation ruled that Giordano Bruno's books were to be added to the Index of Forbidden Books, and the Italian thinker was sentenced to death. The story goes that, when he heard what his fate would be, he stared at the judges and boldly said that, when they passed sentence, they were more afraid than he was when he heard it. Bruno, during his imprisonment and trial, displayed tremendous fortitude and stood firm in defense of his beliefs. The Italian philosopher was taken to the Campo dei Fiori on February 17, 1600. He was strung up naked on a stake, a wooden object shoved into his mouth to stop him from speaking too provocatively, and burned alive. This ultimate act of cruelty, preventing him from speaking, turned Giordano Bruno into a symbol for those who stand up for free thought and freedom of expression. He influenced the great personalities who followed him, such as Galileo Galilei and the philosopher Leibniz. His works are constantly studied, read, and researched to this day. Giordano Bruno's life was adapted into a movie in 1973. His extensive oeuvre includes important books such as Cause, Principle, and Unity, On Infinity, the Universe and the Worlds, and The Heroic Frenzies. His works show how cutting-edge his ideas were for the era he lived in. Giordano Bruno was one of the most heterodox philosophers in the history of Western thought, and surely one of the most daring and brave.